The autumn festival was the biggest event in our town. It was the only night of the year when Main Street burst into life instead of looking like a ghost town. The steps of the courthouse were glowing with strings of lights, and the scent of warm apple cider filled the crisp air. Every shop displayed pumpkins and scarecrows, making the whole place look like a picture-perfect American town. I was working at the Ringtos booth with 3 of my friends to get our school community service hours. Honestly, we were just messing around and teasing the kids who kept missing the soda bottles. The prizes were cheap plastic toys, but the kids were thrilled, and I was just going through the motions. The street was packed with families, strollers, teenagers, and people carrying plates of food. A marching band moved through the crowd, flanked by stalls selling sweets, face painting, and raffle tickets. Paper lanterns swayed gently in the cold breeze above the crowd. In the middle of all this commotion, 2 figures caught my attention coming down the street. I could not tell if they were men or young adults, but they wore strange cardboard masks with oversized noses and horribly painted smiles. At first, I thought they were just wearing costumes for the festival, but no one else looked like them. They were different in a way that made my skin crawl. They were unnaturally tall, with impossibly long arms that reached all the way down to their knees, and their bodies were stretched thin as if someone had pulled them upward. Looking at them gave me an instant chill, though I could not explain why. My friend mentioned that people feel this way when they see something that looks human, but clearly is not. Just then, a woman passed by, holding her little girl by the hand. The girl held a candy apple coated in red sugar, laughing as she pulled her mother toward the petting zoo. It was a completely normal and innocent scene, but as the masked figures passed by, they slowed their pace and stared intently at the mother and child. Nobody else noticed except me. I froze, clutching a ring as my hands went dry with tension. I knew something was wrong, but I tried to convince myself it was just a Halloween prank. A short while later, the band stopped playing, and the crowd moved toward the food stalls. The mother and her daughter headed back through a narrow alley between the barber shop and an old storefront. A string of lights above the alley was half burnt out, leaving the path dimly lit. About 10 paces behind them, the 2 masked figures changed direction and followed them into the dark alley, tracking them like predators. I asked my friend if he saw what I was seeing. He looked over but said nothing. At the same time, the woman glanced back, gripped her daughter's hand tighter, and quickened her pace. Suddenly, the figures accelerated with terrifying speed. Within seconds, they caught up and trapped them at the end of the alley. Without thinking, I jumped over the booth counter and ran toward them, with my friend right behind me. The air was thick with the smell of popcorn and sugar, but the rush of adrenaline drowned out everything else. When I got closer, I saw one of the figures pressing the woman against the wall while she held her daughter, trying to shield her. Up close, the mask did not look like it was made of cardboard at all. It was strangely smooth, covered in tiny cracks, with no skin visible anywhere underneath, even though the body was terrifyingly tall. I yelled at him to leave them alone, but he did not respond. The second figure stepped in front of us to block our way. My friend grabbed a metal chair and raised it, hoping to scare them off. But the creature twisted its neck toward us in an impossible motion, spinning its head almost entirely around like an owl. It was a sight I will never forget. My friend swung the chair and struck the creature. A piece of the mask broke off, but underneath was the exact same gray material. Its face itself was made of that substance, not human flesh. I took advantage of the moment to pull the woman and her child away. As the creature's hand slipped off her shoulder, it left behind a strange gray residue that stained her clothes. Right then, the second figure lunged with unnatural speed, grabbing my friend's arm and twisting it violently. My friend screamed in pain. I kicked the creature in the leg with all my strength. It flinched, released my friend, and we all sprinted back toward the main street. We reached the crowded area, and people finally began to notice what was happening. A father rushed toward us. A food vendor grabbed a heavy iron ladle to use as a weapon, and the school principal arrived at the scene. Soon, a crowd gathered around the two masked figures. Oddly, the creatures moved with short, rapid steps, almost like sea creatures. Suddenly, one of them struck a man who came running over, knocking him into the bushes, and pounced on him, beating him relentlessly. I was the closest, so I rushed in to help. That was my biggest mistake. The second figure turned and delivered a powerful blow to my ribs. It felt like being hit by a boulder. I gasped for air, doubled over in excruciating pain. My friend quickly pulled me back behind the booth. By now, the townspeople began surrounding the two figures from all sides. The little girl was crying hysterically, while her mother desperately tried to comfort her, telling her it was over. The crowd surged into the alley, but as soon as they saw the faces of those two creatures up close, everyone froze. The creatures carried no weapons, but their mere presence was deeply horrifying. People shouted at them to stop and put their hands up, but neither figure reacted. Even when threats were yelled, there was no response at all. Suddenly, someone threw a metal chair that hit one of them hard, but the creature did not flinch or even acknowledge it. Then, both figures began walking toward the far end of the street, where thick pine trees met a temporary plastic fence marking the festival grounds. Oddly, they did not climb over it. Instead, their bodies slid through the narrow gaps in an impossible manner, flattening out and passing right through without the fence making a single sound. A man nearby pulled out a handgun and fired a shot toward the trees. The gunshot echoed through the night before, fading into the dense forest. Suddenly, the sounds of the night rushed back. The power generator flickered, and people started screaming, stunned that a weapon had actually been fired. But after what everyone witnessed, no one blamed him. The mother sat on the curb holding her child. The strange grey powder was still smeared across her shirt, flaking off whenever she moved. The police arrived shortly after and quickly took control. They set up barricades, stretched police tape, and barked orders over their radios. The chief tried to reassure the crowd, claiming it was just two drunk pranksters in costumes, but his voice lacked conviction. Even the deputy who had been knocked down could not bring himself to look anyone in the eye. Every eyewitness story matched. They were unnaturally tall, clearly not human, and the masks could not be removed. One person claimed to hear a sound like a mechanical laugh, while another insisted they made no sound at all. Paramedics bandaged my friend's sprained wrist and placed ice packs on my bruised ribs. The little girl was wrapped in a thermal blanket and offered water, but she remained silent, staring wide-eyed down the dark alley as if she had seen something no child should ever witness. When search parties entered the forest with flashlights, the thick trees had already swallowed every trace. The plastic fence appeared completely intact, but a closer look revealed a fine grey powder clinging to the narrow gaps where they slipped through. The chief ended the festival early, ordering everyone to pack up and clear out while placing patrol cars and extra lighting around the perimeter. Everyone agreed without argument, because no one truly understood what had just taken place. We walked home in groups. I made it back with my friend and a few classmates. My ribs throbbed with pain, and my friend kept clutching his wrist to make sure it was still functional. The moment I got inside, I scrubbed my hands repeatedly until the grey residue washed off, but a strange chalky smell lingered on my skin. As far as I know, those two were never seen again. The town increased patrols, installed brighter streetlights, and the festival committee even bought metal detectors, though no one knew what good they would do. The alley where it happened was marked with a no standing sign. People tried to write it off as an elaborate prank, but no one was truly convinced. Even the biggest pranksters started walking in the middle of the sidewalk, avoiding dark corners. The next day, the chief stood outside the courthouse and told the local paper that two intoxicated troublemakers in masks caused the disturbance, holding firm to that official statement. But everyone who was there that night knew the truth. The mothers holding their children, the men who tried to fight back, and the students who went home with bruises all knew better. They saw how those things moved, how the masks cracked without falling off, and how a joyful festival turned into sheer terror. Nobody talked about it openly, but nobody bought the official story either. Since then, powerful floodlights illuminate every corner. Volunteers patrol the streets. Bags are searched at every gate, and security forces have multiplied for every town gathering. It might be the best the town can do, but I am certain none of it will be enough to stop them if they ever decide to come back.